Welcome to Rowing with the Homies. I'm your host, Finlos, and I'm really glad you're here. On this show, we explore the deep connection between big ideas, current events, and our personal, mental, and physical health. We talk about the inner work, the quiet, disciplined effort that makes the external movements of our lives meaningful. And what's on my mind today is the point at which a person's world stops expanding, and how quietly that calcification happens right under our noses. Sociologists and psychologists have spent a lot of time studying a phenomenon known as musical paralysis. Research shows that for most people, musical tastes crystallize somewhere between the ages of 13 and 22. By the time most people reach their early 30s, their willingness to seek out new sound drops off a cliff, and they retreat almost entirely into the music of their youth. We tend to write off this behavior as a harmless quirk of getting older, assuming people are simply busy or that music isn't made like it used to be. But sitting with that data, these findings, reveals that many of us have a protective reflex. Our teenage years and early 20s leave our emotional nerve endings exposed. The albums tied to that period become anchored to our first real experiences of autonomy, heartbreak, identity, joy, and revisiting those same tracks decades later often acts like a trip back into a familiar emotional climate. It's nostalgia acting as a psychological safe space. Sticking purely to the familiar is an avoidance of cognitive friction. When we look deeper at why we freeze our worlds like this, it's not just laziness. I think it comes down more to a profound fear of instability. Many of us reach a point where we become aware that our inherited beliefs, routines, or worldviews don't actually fit who we are anymore. We feel the friction of internal misalignment, but we endure that quiet, constant misalignment for decades because we are far more afraid of the destabilization that comes with change. We choose the familiar discomfort of outdated schema over the terrifying vulnerability of having to rebuild ourselves from scratch. And it's interesting to think about how streaming algorithms reinforce this exact vulnerability trap. Digital platforms are engineered specifically to minimize friction. If a song doesn't catch us in the first few seconds, we skip it. The algorithm observes our impatience, notes our comfort zone, and feeds us more of what we already like. It creates an endless feedback loop that flatters our existing taste while quietly starving our capacity for curiosity. My own journey into collecting vinyl has forced me to begin to work really hard to opt out of that loop. Holding a physical record, pulling it from its sleeve, and taking the time to sit and listen and turn and switch records requires a commitment to time. We can't seamlessly skip a track just because we feel a momentary pang of boredom or discomfort. We have to stand up, walk over to the turntable, lift the tone arm, and manually intervene. The physical medium demands that I sit with the music, the art, on its own terms. It forces me to give it room to breathe before I pass judgment. And as I consider this, I see a constant tension between comfort and discovery. I think about pulling out a record like one I recently discovered. It's an album called RwtH by an artist called Theon Cross. And it's out there. It's a tuba-led album, a tuba, which might make me expect traditional orchestral music or Dixieland jazz. But from the moment the first track starts, he completely dismantles what one might think a brass instrument is capable of doing. Theon Cross uses the tuba not just for bass lines, but as a percussion instrument and as the melodic lead, driving the instrument through heavy dub, sub-bass, London grime, hip-hop, and Caribbean reggae rhythms. It completely reshapes my understanding of what a traditional instrument like the tuba can do. And hearing a record like that opens a whole new avenue of exploration and discovery for me. It pulled me into a broader network of artists pushing and blending styles I never thought to pair, where jazz collides with electronic dance music or funk collides with raw punk. It forces me to realize that the boundaries we draw around genres and around ourselves are entirely artificial. A record collection can become a physical map of a person's psychological architecture. It shows whether one uses culture purely to anchor who we used to be, or if we are using it actively to push our own boundaries and to explore areas of discomfort. So I want to ask you, when was the last time you put on an album that actually made you feel uncomfortable? Not one that you had a good sense that you knew you'd like, but something that genuinely challenged your defaults and forced you to rethink what you were listening to. And that gets me thinking about what actually happens in the brain when we encounter something unexpected, and why a new sound can feel so demanding to our minds. Familiar music operates on a loop of prediction fulfillment. The brain anticipates where the chord progression might be going, where the rhythm might land, how the tension might resolve. And when those predictions come true, the brain rewards itself. It feels safe. Unfamiliar or boundary-pushing music deprives us of easy resolutions. When an artist fuses genres that are surprising, that we think might not even work together, drops or changes a tempo unexpectedly, or pushes into abstract soundscapes, our predictive machinery breaks down, and we have to sit with ambiguity. We are forced to tolerate that initial friction before we can make sense of what we are hearing. And this process mirrors the hard work of unlearning inherited social, political, and personal scripts. The educator and theorist Paulo Freire talked about this when he wrote about the fear of freedom. He explored how deeply we internalize the rules and expectations handed to us by our upbringing or our society. Freire observed that when we are offered genuine liberation, the chance to think independently and construct our own worldview, we often hesitate. We experience a profound anxiety because freedom strips away our prepackaged answers. Clinging to inherited, prescribed ways of being feels safe because it relieves us of responsibility. If we follow the scripts we were given, we never have to account for our own choices. Rebuilding our own minds is terrifying because it requires critical consciousness. It forces us to step out of passive compliance and take ownership of who we are becoming. The author Bell Hooks built on this idea when she wrote about the pain of discovery. In her work on critical pedagogy, she emphasized that genuine learning is rarely a smooth or pleasant accumulation of facts. Real growth requires a willingness to unlearn, to actively dismantle ideas that previously gave us comfort. She pointed out that when we let go of an old worldview, there is a period where we feel completely ungrounded. Our old ways of thinking no longer work, but our new ones also aren't yet fully formed. And so many of us abandon the journey right at that point of disorientation. We experience the anxiety of being caught between frameworks, and we scramble backward toward the safety of what we already knew. We hear a strange chord, feel the discomfort of an unfamiliar idea, and immediately retreat. If I refuse to engage with a new album or a strange sound simply because it makes me uncomfortable on first listen, I doubt my capacity to sit with the discomfort of having my core beliefs to be challenged. There is a distinction to make here because culture easily turns genuine exploration into a brand. Music circles are full of people who hoard rare vinyl pressings, memorize critical buzzwords, or latch onto underground styles purely for clout. They use boundary-pushing art as a social signifier to announce taste or gain access to specific crowds. It is aesthetic adoption as posture. And we see this happen all the time in cultural spaces. And I've even had to catch myself doing it too. We assemble a pristine, immaculate record collection filled with rare experimental pressings and avant-garde releases. Or maybe it's more about ideas. Maybe it's more about saying the right left-leaning buzzwords or using the right radical terminology or joining the right group to demonstrate your being with it. And on paper, it might suggest a mind that is open, curious, and constantly pushing boundaries. But if we're honest with ourselves, if we look at our behaviors and check them against the beliefs that we're actually saying that we hold, sometimes we aren't actually engaging. Sometimes it's just a flex. The ability to recite memorized lines or popular phrases, waving the banner. It's a way to purchase social capital. We can learn the latest progressive terminology, cite critical theory, and talk endlessly about personal growth, while our actual treatment of the people around us stays rigid and selfish. We adopt the language of liberation and self-awareness as a tool for social positioning, using intellectual vocabulary to shield ourselves from ever having to do the unglamorous work of self-examination. New concepts get parroted to secure standing, while core ideas remain entirely untouched. And this comparison, this accumulation of new music or adopting of new vocabulary, these things mean nothing if the underlying structure stays cemented in place. The difference between posture and real growth comes down to whether we allow new input to alter us. Truly engaging with a new artist, a challenging genre, or a difficult truth requires vulnerability. It means letting the experience disrupt our defaults and change how we move through the world. So how do we actually move past posture and begin doing that internal labor? It doesn't happen in isolation. We need places where our assumptions can brush up against someone else's reality. I've seen this play out in a very practical way in my own life. Recently, I joined a local vinyl listening club. The premise is simple. A group of us gather in a space, and each person brings a short mini set of records to play for the group. On the surface, it sounds like a casual music night. But the moment you step up to the turntable, you realize how much subtle psychological territory you're navigating. When it's my turn to play, I am presenting a piece of myself. I'm choosing tracks that reflect my history, my mood, or my taste, and I have to sit there in real time and consider how my choices land in that specific room. Am I playing something just to seek validation? Am I trying to establish a certain posture, or am I offering something genuine? And then the script flips. I sit back down and I listen to someone else's set. I watch them place the needle on a record I might never have chosen for myself. I listen to their sequence, their pacing, and how their specific sonic worldview interacts with the overall feel of the event. In those moments, I'm forced out of my own head. I have to suspend my immediate impulse to judge or categorize, and instead ask, what are they seeing and hearing that I missed? What story are they telling? And the room becomes a living microcosm of the exact work I'm talking about. It's a low-stakes space to practice expanding tolerance for discomfort, When someone plays a track that clashes with my own defaults, I don't get to hit a skip button. I don't get to hide behind an algorithm that flatters my existing preferences. I have to sit with the dissonance, compare their framework to my own, and hopefully allow my range to widen. If we want to build that same capacity in our daily lives, in ourselves, and in our communities, we have to create intentional rituals of friction. And we can start by examining 3 basic areas of alignment. First, we can examine the motives behind what we curate, whether it's music, movies, books on our shelves, or the language that we use, the political ideas, the social structures that we say we adhere to. Ask, am I engaging with this because it changes how I live, or because of how I want to be perceived while holding it? If an idea doesn't alter our actual behavior toward the people around us, it's just decor. Second, practice active receptivity in shared spaces. Seek out environments where you aren't the primary curator. Put yourself in spaces where it's collaborative and where you are required to sit quietly with someone else's expression without immediately trying to correct it, edit it, or match it with your own story. And finally, locate the boundary of your own friction. Pay attention to the exact moments you feel the urge to retreat or tune out, whether in a conversation or with a piece of art. That tension is the boundary of your current schema. Instead of backing away, treat that discomfort as an invitation. Ask, what belief inside me is feeling threatened right now, and why? Real personal and community growth isn't about collecting the right answers or curating the perfect aesthetic. Building the stamina to stay in the room when things feel unfamiliar takes practice and takes the work of building resilience, allowing ourselves to be reshaped by the noise until we find a new way to move together. And that brings me to the final segment. And today, depression is not showing up as a dramatic crisis. Today, depression feels like a locked groove on a scratched record. It's the relentless repetition when the stylus gets caught in a tiny scratch, playing the exact same few seconds of audio on a loop. My brain replays the same regrets, the same internal monologues, the same familiar grief. Not because those thoughts offer answers, but because the groove is well worn and predictable. In those moments, retreat into the familiar feels safe, but it functions like a trap. Depression craves old routines because they require zero effort. Depression invites us to sit inside familiar pain simply because we know the layout of the room. When I am stuck in that static space, picking out an unfamiliar album feels like lifting a weight. Depression creates that weight of inertia. The thought of exposing my brain to something unknown, something that requires focus, adaptation, or emotional energy, it feels impossible. Every instinct tells me to stay in the groove, stay with the familiar background noise that demands nothing from me and offers no surprises. Choosing instead to play something new, an artist I've never heard, a record that straddles genres, or a sound that clashes with my current mood, is a quiet, careful, thoughtful, intentional act of resistance. I'm not pretending that the weight isn't there. Instead, I'm using sound to nudge open a mind that wants to keep its doors shut. Continued motion forward rarely looks like a great leap. Often, it's just the willingness to disrupt the loop, to sit quietly with an unexpected sound until the needle clears the scratch and finds the rest of the record. And that's where I'll leave you for this episode. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. You can hear new episodes of this and all my shows when they drop by following Finlos Lives on your preferred podcast platform. I'm always curious about your thoughts on this topic, but feel free to reach out with comments or suggestions for new ideas to finlos@finloslives.com or leave me a note on social media. You can find this and all past episodes at finloslives.com. I look forward to our next conversation.